The blood on Caleb Mercer's knuckles had barely dried when the preacher asked if he took this woman to be his lawfully wedded wife. His shirt was torn, his lip was split open, and the woman standing beside him, a woman he had met only 48 hours before, was trembling so hard the wildflowers in her hands shook like leaves in a storm. She did not look at him. She looked at the door, as if any second now the men who had been chasing them would kick it down and finish what they started. Caleb looked at her, at the bruise forming beneath her left eye, at the way her fingers gripped those flowers like they were the last thing keeping her from falling apart. And he realized something that would have terrified any man with sense. He was not doing this to save her. He was doing this because in 2 days, this stranger had become the only thing in the world he was not willing to lose. But to understand how a man who left home to buy cattle ended up bleeding in a chapel with a bride no one expected, we need to go back 3 days. To the morning, everything changed. The Mercer Ranch sat 14 miles east of Copper Hill, Kansas, on a stretch of land that had buried more dreams than it had ever grown. Caleb's father had built it with his bare hands, and Caleb had inherited it the way most men in the West inherited things, not with pride, but with debt. The fences were rotting. The barn leaned to the left like a drunk man after midnight, and the herd, what was left of it, had dwindled to a number so small that Caleb stopped counting because counting meant admitting what he already knew. The ranch was dying. His brother, Ward, had told him 100 times to sell. Ward lived in town now, wore a clean collar, and worked at the land office where he spent his days filing claims for other men's futures while pretending he had never walked away from his own. The two brothers had not shared a meal in over a year. They had not shared an honest word in longer than that. But it was Ward who told him about the cattle auction in Abilene. 40 head of Longhorn, selling cheap because the original buyer had dropped dead of typhoid 3 days before delivery. It was the kind of opportunity that did not come twice, and Caleb knew it. He counted every dollar he had left, sold his father's pocket watch, the one thing he swore he would never sell, and rode out at dawn with enough money to save the ranch or lose everything trying. The ride to Abilene took 2 days. 2 days of dust, sun, and silence. 2 days of thinking about a life that had somehow become nothing but work and waiting. Caleb was 36 years old. His wife, Eliza, had died 4 years ago during a fever that swept through the county like God's own broom, clearing out anyone who had the misfortune of being loved by someone. After she died, Caleb stopped going to church, not because he stopped believing, because he believed too much, and believing meant accepting that God had looked at his wife, the kindest soul in 3 counties, and decided she was the one who had to go. He arrived in Abilene on a Thursday evening. The town smelled like cattle and commerce. Drovers filled the saloons. Dust hung in the air like a permanent fog. Caleb found a room above the general store, paid 50 cents for a bed that smelled like the last man who slept in it, and went to check on the auction house. That was when he saw her. She was standing outside the land office at the end of the main street, and for a moment, Caleb thought she was a painting. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was completely still. While the entire town moved around her, horses and wagons and men shouting prices, she stood like someone who had stopped expecting anything from the world and was simply waiting for it to confirm what she already knew. Her name was July Dawson, and she was holding a sign that Caleb had to read twice before he understood. Bride available. Inquire within. The sign was propped against the hitching post beside her. She was not holding it. She was standing next to it the way a person stands next to their own grave marker, with a kind of quiet fury that most people would mistake for calm. Caleb walked past. He had not come to Abilene for a woman. He had come for cattle. He had $72 in his boot in a ranch that needed saving, and there was no room in that equation for anything else. But he turned back, not because of her face, not because of the sign, because of her hands. They were clenched at her sides, knuckles white, and there was dirt under her fingernails. Not the dirt of a woman who had fallen, the dirt of a woman who had been digging, working, fighting, and losing. He did not speak to her, not yet. But he noticed something that made him stop walking entirely. A man came out of the land office behind her, tall, broad, wearing a coat that cost more than Caleb's horse. The man put his hand on July's shoulder, and she flinched. Not dramatically, not the way women flinch in stories. She flinched the way someone flinches when they have been touched in that exact spot too many times, and the body remembers even when the mind tries to forget. The man's name was Harlan Briggs. Caleb did not know that yet. He did not know that Harlan Briggs owned half the land between Abilene and the river. He did not know that Harlan had bought July's father's debt 6 months ago when the old man died, and that the debt had passed to July like a disease passes through blood. He did not know that the sign was not July's idea. It was Harlan's. A humiliation designed to break her into accepting his offer, an offer that had nothing to do with marriage and everything to do with ownership. Caleb did not know any of this, but he knew what a flinch like that meant. He had seen it in horses that had been beaten, in dogs that had been kicked, and in one woman, his mother, who had spent 20 years standing next to a man who made her feel exactly like that. He went to the auction the next morning. The cattle were good, healthy, strong. The price was right. Caleb placed his bid and waited. The auctioneer pointed to him, then to another man, then back to him. Caleb raised his hand one more time. $72. Everything he had. The other bidder raised to $75. Caleb's hand dropped. The cattle were gone. He stood in that auction house for a long time after it ended. The smell of hay and sweat hung around him like a funeral shroud. $72 in his boot and nothing to show for the ride. The ranch would not survive the winter. The fences would fall. The last of his herd would scatter or starve. And Caleb Mercer would become another name that the Kansas wind erased from memory. He walked out into the sun, and there she was again. July Dawson. Same spot, same sign, same clenched fists. But this time, something was different. This time, Harlan Briggs was standing in front of her, and he was not alone. 2 men flanked him, the kind of men who wore guns the way other men wore hats, casually and always. Harlan was talking, but his voice was low, and Caleb could only hear fragments. Words like tonight and final offer, and nowhere left to run. July's face was stone, but her eyes were not. Her eyes were the eyes of a woman calculating the distance between where she stood and the nearest open road, and realizing it was not far enough. Caleb told himself to walk away. He told himself it was not his fight. He told himself he had his own problems, his own debts, his own dying ranch in a dying county in a country that did not care whether he lived or disappeared. He told himself all of that. Then Harlan grabbed her arm. It was not violent. That was the worst part. It was practiced, familiar, the grip of a man who had done this so many times that it had become as natural as breathing. And July did not scream. She did not pull away. She simply closed her eyes, and in that single gesture, Caleb saw every fight she had ever lost. He crossed the street before he knew he was moving. Let her go. His own voice surprised him. It was quiet, calm, the kind of calm that men in the West recognized instantly, not as peace, but as the sound a gun makes in the half-second before it fires. Harlan turned. He looked at Caleb the way a man looks at a fly that has landed on his dinner plate. Annoyed, mildly curious, not threatened. This is not your concern, friend. She does not look like she wants to be held. She does not look like she has a choice. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. The 2 men behind Harlan shifted their weight, hands drifting toward their belts. The street around them went quiet the way streets do when violence is deciding whether or not to arrive. July opened her eyes. She looked at Caleb, and in that look, there was no plea, no damsel begging for rescue. There was something far more dangerous. There was recognition, as if she had seen him before, not his face, but his kind. The kind of man who walks into a fire because walking away would mean living with the smell of smoke for the rest of his life. How much? Caleb said. Harlan blinked. Excuse me? The sign says bride available. Inquire within. Caleb nodded toward the hitching post. I am inquiring. Silence. The kind of silence that has teeth. Harlan laughed. It was a short, ugly sound like a bark. You cannot afford her. How much is the debt? The laughter stopped. Harlan studied him now. Really studied him. The way a card player studies an opponent who has just made an impossible bet. $90. The number hung in the air like a noose. Caleb had 72. The math was simple. The math was impossible. But July was looking at him, and in her eyes, for the first time since he had seen her, something was moving. Something that looked terrifyingly like hope. The kind of hope that a person allows themselves only when they know it will destroy them if it turns out to be a lie. Caleb reached into his boot and pulled out his money. He counted it in front of Harlan, slowly, bill by bill, every dollar he owned in the world. He set it on the barrel beside them. $72, he said. I said 90, and I said 72. That is what I have. Every cent. Take it or leave it. Harlan looked at the money, then at July, then at Caleb. The calculation behind his eyes was visible, the kind of arithmetic that men like Harlan performed constantly, weighing profit against pride, control against convenience. You are buying yourself a world of trouble, Harlan said quietly. She is not what you think she is. I am not what you think I am either. Another silence, longer, heavier. Then Harlan took the money. He took it the way a snake takes a mouse, quickly and with the certainty that there would always be more. He folded the bills into his coat, nodded to his men, and turned to leave. But before he walked away, he leaned close to Caleb, close enough that only Caleb could hear. You have until Sunday. After that, I am coming to collect what is really owed. And friend, it is not money. He was gone before Caleb could answer. July stood in the street. The sign was still propped against the post. The sun was still burning. The town was still moving. But something had shifted, the way the air shifts before a storm rolls in. Not cooler, not darker, just different, charged. She looked at him. Why did you do that? It was the first time he had heard her voice. It was low, steady, the kind of voice that had been forged in fires that most people never survived. Caleb looked at her, at the bruise under her eye, at the dirt beneath her nails, at the clenched fists that had finally, barely, loosened. He did not have an answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that a rational man would accept. He had just spent every dollar he had, money meant to save his ranch, his home, his future, on a woman he did not know, against a man he could not beat. For a reason he could not explain. I do not know, he said, and it was the most honest thing he had said in 4 years. July Dawson looked at Caleb Mercer for a long time. The wind moved her hair across her face. Somewhere down the street, a horse whinnied and a child laughed. The world was still turning, even though everything inside it had just changed. Then I suppose, she said quietly, we are both in trouble. She was right. She just did not know how much. Because Caleb Mercer had not only spent his last dollar on a woman he had never met, he had made an enemy of the most powerful man in Abilene. And Harlan Briggs was not the kind of man who lost. He was the kind of man who waited, planned, and when the moment was right, took everything. And Sunday was only 3 days away. What Caleb did not know, what he could not have known, was that the danger was not only in front of him, it was behind him too. Back in Copper Hill, in the land office where his brother Ward sat behind a clean desk with clean hands, a letter had already been sent, a letter addressed to Harlan Briggs, a letter that contained information about the Mercer Ranch, its debts, its boundaries, and its single remaining weakness. The man who had betrayed Caleb was not a stranger. He was blood, and the woman standing beside him in the dust of Abilene, the woman with the bruised eye and the clenched fists and the voice like forged steel, was carrying a secret of her own. A secret that, when it surfaced, would change not just this story, but everything Caleb Mercer believed about the life he was trying to save. The ride back to Copper Hill would take 2 days. They did not have 2 days. They left Abilene before the sun finished rising. Caleb had sold his saddle blanket and his spare boots to buy provisions for the ride. And even then, all they had was a canteen, some dried beef, and a silence between them so thick it felt like a third passenger on the horse. July rode behind him. She had not spoken since they left the town limits. Her arms were around his waist because there was nowhere else to put them. But she held him the way a person holds a rope over a canyon, not out of affection, but out of necessity. Her body was rigid against his back. Every muscle in her was clenched. as if she was ready to jump off and run at any moment, and Caleb understood that. He understood it because he had spent the last 4 years holding on to things the same way, not because he wanted to, but because letting go meant falling. They rode for 3 hours before she spoke. "You should know something." Caleb did not turn around. "All right, I am not going to marry you." He let that sit for a moment. The prairie stretched in every direction, flat and golden and indifferent. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals that were invisible from the ground. "I did not ask you to. You paid for me. I paid a debt. There is a difference. Not to men like Harlan Briggs. I am not Harlan Briggs." Another silence. But this one was different. Lighter, as if a single brick had been removed from the wall between them. Not enough to see through, but enough to let the air move. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Copper Hill? My ranch? You can stay until you figure out where you want to go. Then you go." Just like that. Just like that. She was quiet again, but her grip around his waist loosened, just barely, and Caleb felt it the way you feel the first warm day after a long winter. Not as heat, but as the absence of cold. They stopped at a creek to water the horse and rest. Caleb built a small fire while July sat on a rock near the water, washing the dust from her face and hands. The bruise under her eye had darkened, turning from red to a deep purple that made Caleb's jaw tighten every time he looked at it. "How long?" he asked without planning to. She looked at him. "How long what? How long did he have you?" July's hand stilled in the water. The creek moved around her fingers like it was trying to carry the question away. She did not answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was flat. The flatness of someone describing a wound that has been open so long, they have forgotten what it felt like to not be bleeding. "My father borrowed money from Harlan 2 years ago. We had a small farm outside of Abilene, wheat and some chickens, nothing grand. My father was a good man, but a poor businessman, and Harlan was the kind of lender who made sure you could never pay him back. The interest grew faster than anything we could grow in the ground. When my father died last winter, the debt became mine. Harlan came to the farm 3 days after the funeral. He said I had 2 choices, marry him or be sold. Sold. That is what the sign was. His idea of a compromise. Let the town see me standing there like livestock. Let me feel what it was like to have a price. He thought it would break me into choosing him." She pulled her hands from the water and dried them on her skirt. He was almost right. Caleb stared at the fire. The flames were small but steady, the kind of fire that would last if you were patient with it. "You said almost." July looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time since they had started riding, her eyes were dark brown, nearly black, and there was something in them that Caleb had not seen before. Not gratitude, not fear, something sharper, something that cut. "Then you showed up," she said, "and ruined everything." Caleb almost smiled. Almost. It had been so long since his face had made that shape that the muscles were not sure they remembered how. They rode through the night. Caleb did not want to stop because stopping meant Harlan's men could catch up, and he knew they would be coming. A man like Harlan Briggs did not lose $72, and a woman he considered his property without sending someone to bring both back. The question was not if, but when. The answer came at dawn. They had just crossed the Smoky Hill River when Caleb saw the dust. 2 riders, moving fast from the east, close enough that he could see the shapes of their hats against the rising sun. He recognized them. The same 2 men who had flanked Harlan in the street. The same men who wore their guns, like other men, wore hats. "Hold on," Caleb said. He kicked the horse into a gallop before July could ask why. She tightened her arms around him and pressed her face against his back, and Caleb felt her heartbeat through his shirt, fast and hard, a drumbeat counting down to something neither of them could see. The horse was fast, but tired. 2 riders on one mount against 2 men on fresh horses was arithmetic that did not favor Caleb, and he knew it. He scanned the landscape, looking for anything. A ridge, a tree line, a ravine, anywhere he could put ground between them and the men behind. He found it. A dry creek bed, carved deep into the prairie by spring floods, hidden from the surface until you were almost on top of it. Caleb pulled the horse down the embankment and dismounted, pulling July down after him. Stay with the horse. What are you going to do? Caleb pulled his revolver from his belt. He checked the cylinder. 4 rounds. He had 4 rounds against 2 men who probably had 20 between them. Something I will probably regret. He climbed back up the embankment and lay flat against the grass, watching. The 2 riders had slowed. They had lost the trail at the river and were fanning out, searching. Caleb's heart was steady. His hands were still. This was not the first time he had held a gun with intent, and that was a part of his life he had never told anyone about. Not Eliza, not Ward, not the town of Copper Hill that knew him as nothing more than a quiet rancher with a dying herd and a dead wife. Before the ranch, before Eliza, before Kansas, there had been a war. And in that war, Caleb Mercer had been someone else entirely. Someone who did not shake. Someone who did not miss. Someone who had buried that version of himself so deep that he thought he would never have to dig it up again. The riders split. One moved north along the riverbank. The other came straight toward the creek bed. Caleb could hear the horse's hooves now, could smell the dust, could feel the vibration in the ground beneath his chest. He waited. The rider came over the edge of the creek bed and Caleb fired. Not to kill. He had spent 4 years trying not to be the man he used to be, and he was not going to abandon that in a single morning. The shot hit the ground a foot in front of the horse, and the animal reared, throwing the rider backward. The man hit the ground hard, and Caleb was on him before he could reach for his weapon, pressing the barrel of his revolver against the man's throat. "Tell Harlan the debt is paid," Caleb said. "She is not his." The man's eyes were wide, not with fear of the gun, with fear of what he saw in Caleb's face. The recognition that the man kneeling over him had done this before, many times. And the only reason he was alive was because Caleb was choosing, actively and deliberately, not to kill him. "He will not stop," the man whispered. "Then neither will I." Caleb took the man's gun, his ammunition, and his horse. He left him in the creek bed with enough water to walk back to Abilene and a story to tell Harlan Briggs that would either make the man cautious or make him furious. Caleb was betting on furious. Furious men made mistakes. Careful men did not. He rode back to where July was waiting. She was standing beside the horse, and she had picked up a rock, a large one, the kind that could crack a skull if thrown with enough anger. She was holding it in both hands, ready, not hiding, not cowering, ready. Caleb looked at the rock, then at her. "Were you going to fight them with that?" "If I had to." Something moved in Caleb's chest, something that had been still for 4 years. It was not love, not yet. It was the thing that comes before love, the thing that is more dangerous than love, because it has no name and no defense. It was the sudden, terrifying awareness that another person exists in the world who is built from the same iron as you. They rode for Copper Hill on 2 horses now, side by side, and for the first time, the silence between them was not a wall. It was a bridge, fragile, new, the kind of thing that could collapse under the weight of a single wrong word, but was strong enough, for now, to carry them both. They reached the outskirts of Copper Hill near sunset the next day. The town appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of wooden buildings and dirt streets and church steeples that had been promising salvation to people who never quite received it. Caleb had not been gone long, but the town looked different now. Or maybe he was the one who was different. The first person they saw was Margaret Dunhill, the postmistress, a woman whose tongue moved faster than any telegraph wire ever built. She saw Caleb ride in with July beside him, and her eyes went wide, then narrow, then wide again, cycling through surprise, judgment, and curiosity in the time it took to blink. By morning, every soul in Copper Hill would know that Caleb Mercer had left for cattle and come back with a woman. And by noon, the stories would have grown legs, arms, and teeth. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, the problem was the ranch. When they arrived, Caleb saw it through July's eyes, and the shame hit him like a fist. The sagging fence, the leaning barn, the house, a 2-room structure that had once been painted white and was now the color of exhaustion. The yard was more dirt than grass. The remaining cattle, 11 head, stood in the pasture like forgotten sentences in an unfinished letter. July dismounted and looked at the ranch. She did not say anything for a long time. Caleb waited for the judgment, the same judgment Ward had delivered 100 times, the calculation that this land was worth more as a memory than as a future. "The soil is good," she said. Caleb looked at her. "The soil," she repeated, kneeling and running her fingers through the dirt near the fence line. "It has not been turned in a while, but the color is right. You could grow winter wheat here, maybe rye." She stood and brushed off her hands. "The barn needs a new support beam on the north side. The fence posts are rotting from the bottom, which means the drainage is poor, but that is fixable. And those cattle need better pasture, but there is plenty of grass on the western side of that ridge." She said all of this the way a doctor describes an injury. Clinical, precise, not as criticism, but as diagnosis. And Caleb realized, standing in his own yard, that he was looking at a woman who knew land the way he knew horses. Intimately, instinctively, with the kind of knowledge that comes not from books, but from having your hands in the dirt so many times that the dirt becomes part of your blood. "You know farming," he said. "I know surviving." She looked at him, and the edge of something that might have been a smile touched her mouth. They are often the same thing. He gave her the bedroom. He would sleep in the barn. She did not argue. The intimacy of gratitude was still too heavy for either of them to carry. So they handled the arrangement the way they handled everything else, with practical words and careful distance. But that night, as Caleb lay in the barn staring at the ceiling through the gaps in the roof, he heard something that stopped his breath. July was singing, softly, to herself, a melody he did not recognize, low and slow and aching, the kind of song that a person sings not because they are happy, but because they need to remember that their voice still exists. He listened in the dark, and the thing in his chest that had no name grew larger. The next morning, Caleb rode into town for supplies. He tied his horse outside the general store and was halfway through the door when he saw Ward. His brother was standing at the counter, and the moment he saw Caleb, something crossed his face. Not surprise, not happiness. Something that looked, just for a fraction of a second, like guilt. "I heard you came back with company," Ward said. "News travels. Who is she?" "Someone who needed help." Ward studied him. There was a sharpness in his brother's eyes that Caleb had never noticed before, or maybe had never wanted to notice. The sharpness of a man who is always calculating, always measuring what things are worth and what they might cost. "People are talking, Caleb. People always talk. Harlan Briggs is not people." Caleb went still. The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into water, and the ripples moved outward in every direction. "How do you know that name?" Ward's face changed. A door closed behind his eyes. The kind of door that hides rooms a person does not want anyone to see. Everyone between here and Abilene knows Harlan Briggs. He owns half the territory. That is not what I asked. It is all I have to say. The brothers stared at each other across the counter of the general store, and the distance between them, which had been growing for years, suddenly felt like a canyon. Caleb could feel it. Something was wrong. Something beyond the normal silence between two men who had chosen different lives. Ward was hiding something, and whatever it was, it smelled like kerosene, the kind of secret that, once lit, would burn everything around it. Caleb bought his supplies and left without another word. When he got back to the ranch, July was in the yard. She had found an old hoe in the barn and was turning the soil along the fence line, working with a rhythm that said she had done this 10,000 times before. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her hair was tied back. The bruise under her eye was fading from purple to yellow. And in the afternoon light, with the dust on her skin and the sweat on her brow, she looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was. Caleb stood at the gate and watched her. She did not know he was there. She was humming the same melody from last night, and her hands moved through the dirt with a tenderness that made something inside him ache. Not desire, not yet. Something older, something that lived in the space between loneliness and hope. A space so small that most people walked past it without knowing it existed. She looked up and saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. The sun was behind Caleb, and July had to shade her eyes to see him. And in that gesture, hand above her brow, squinting into the light, she looked like someone searching for land from the deck of a ship. "The soil is better than I thought," she said. "So are you," Caleb said. The words came out before he could stop them. They hung in the air between them, fragile and enormous. And Caleb felt the heat rise in his neck because he had not meant to say that. Not like that. Not standing at his own gate like a man who has forgotten how to speak to a woman without accidentally telling her the truth. July's hand lowered slowly from her brow. She looked at him. The almost smile from the night before returned, and this time it stayed a moment longer. "You should be careful, Mr. Mercer. A woman could get used to hearing things like that. That is what I am afraid of." She laughed. It was short and sharp and real. The laugh of someone who has not laughed in so long that the sound surprises even herself. And Caleb felt it hit him in the center of his chest, like a bullet he never saw coming. That night, they sat on the porch, not close, not touching, but near enough that the silence between them was no longer a distance. It was a room they were both learning to live in. July told him about her father, a man who had loved the land more than he understood money, who had planted sunflowers along the fence every spring because he said a farm without flowers was just a prison with better scenery. Caleb told her about Eliza, about the fever, about the morning he woke up and her hand was cold and the world had become a place without color. They did not touch. They did not need to. The words were doing what hands could not yet do. Building something. Laying a foundation that neither of them would admit they were building, because admitting it meant acknowledging that it could be destroyed. But destruction was already on its way. 60 miles east, Harlan Briggs was sitting in his study, reading a letter. The letter was written in careful, precise handwriting. The handwriting of a man who worked at a land office and knew exactly which properties were vulnerable, which debts were overdue, and which brothers had grudges deep enough to be useful. Ward Mercer's letter was simple. It contained the location of the ranch, the amount of Caleb's debts, and a single sentence at the bottom that would change everything. "The woman is there. Come take what is yours." Harlan folded the letter. He poured himself a drink, and he smiled the smile of a man who never loses because he never plays fair. He would leave for Copper Hill in the morning, and he would not be coming alone. 3 days. That was all it took for Caleb Mercer to forget what loneliness felt like. 3 days of watching July turn his dying land into something that breathed again. 3 days of meals shared at a table that had not held 2 plates since Eliza. 3 days of conversations that started with the soil and the cattle and the fence posts and ended always in a place neither of them planned to go. A place where words became quieter and silences became louder, and the distance between them on that porch shrank by inches so small they could pretend it was not happening. But it was happening. On the 3rd morning, Caleb woke in the barn to the sound of July splitting wood. He walked outside and found her in the yard, swinging an axe with a precision that told him she had been doing this since she was old enough to hold one. The sun was barely up. The air was cold. And July was working like a woman who knew that stillness was dangerous, because stillness gave you time to think, and thinking gave you time to feel, and feeling was a luxury that people like her could not afford. Caleb watched her for a moment. Then he walked over, took the axe gently from her hands, and finished the job. She stood beside him, close, closer than she had ever stood before. Their arms nearly touched. The heat from her body reached him through the morning air. And Caleb felt it the way a man dying of thirst feels rain, not with relief, but with the terrifying knowledge that once you taste it, you can never go back to being dry. Caleb. It was the first time she'd used his name. Not Mr. Mercer, not rancher. Caleb. The word in her mouth sounded like it had been waiting there for a long time, learning the shape of her voice before it dared to come out. He stopped swinging. He looked at her. She was looking at the ground. Her hands were clasped in front of her, the way people hold their hands when they are about to say something that has weight. "There is something I need to tell you." The axe lowered. Caleb waited. The morning was silent except for the cattle moving in the pasture and the wind pushing through the grass. And the world held its breath the way the world does when it knows that what comes next will change everything. "Harlan Briggs did not just own my father's debt," July said. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness was costing her. He could see it in her jaw, in the tendons of her neck, in the way her fingers pressed against each other hard enough to turn white. He owned my father. My father worked for Harlan before he started the farm. He was a bookkeeper. He kept records of every deal Harlan ever made, every land grab, every bribed official, every family that was pushed off their property through forged documents and false claims. She looked up at Caleb. Her eyes were wet, but the tears did not fall. They sat there, held in place by a will so strong it could have stopped a river. When my father died, those records did not disappear. He hid them. He hid them because he knew that one day, someone would need them. Someone would need proof that Harlan Briggs was not just a powerful man, but a criminal, a thief who built his empire on stolen land and broken families. Caleb's chest tightened. Where are the records? July reached into the lining of her coat, the same coat she had been wearing since Abilene, and pulled out a small leather journal. It was thin, worn, and stained with the kind of marks that come from being hidden in places where things are not supposed to be hidden. She held it out to Caleb, and her hand was trembling. "This is why Harlan wants me," she said. "Not the debt, not the marriage. This, he knows I have it. He has always known. The sign, the humiliation, the threats, they were never about owning me. They were about finding this book. Because this book is the only thing in the world that can destroy him." Caleb took the journal. It was lighter than he expected. Strange how the things that carry the most power often weigh the least. He opened it. Pages of numbers, names, dates, property descriptions, payments to county officials, forged signatures. Each page was a bullet aimed at Harlan Briggs, and together they were an arsenal. "Why did you not tell me before?" "Because everyone I have ever trusted with this information has either been bought or buried." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Just barely. Just enough. And I was not sure you were different. Are you sure now?" July looked at him. The tears that had been held in place finally moved, not falling, but shifting, catching the light of the morning sun until her eyes looked like they were made of something molten and alive. "I am terrified that I am," she whispered. Caleb looked at the journal in his hands, then at July, then at the horizon, where the sky was turning gold and the world was opening up the way it does when something that was hidden finally comes into the light. He stepped closer to her, close enough that he could count the flecks of amber in her dark eyes, close enough that she could feel his breath, close enough that the space between them became so small it stopped being distance and started being a choice. "I am going to protect you," he said. "Not because I paid a debt, not because you are on my land, because 3 days ago I was a man who had stopped believing that anything good was left in this world. And then you picked up a rock and held it like a weapon, and something inside me remembered what it felt like to be alive." July's lips parted. A sound started to leave her mouth. Maybe a word, maybe his name, maybe something that has no word in any language, because it only exists in the space between two people who are falling and have decided to stop pretending they are not. But the sound never came, because that was the moment they heard the horses. Caleb turned. Dust was rising from the eastern road, a column of it, thick and brown and moving fast. Not 2 riders this time. 6, maybe 7. And at the front, riding a black horse that looked like it had been bred from shadow and bad intentions, was Harlan Briggs. "Get inside," Caleb said. "No." "July." "I said no." She grabbed the journal from his hand and shoved it back into her coat. "I am done running. I have been running since my father died, and every mile I ran, Harlan was still behind me. Running does not work. It never has." Caleb looked at her. The fear in her eyes was real, but it was not the largest thing there. The largest thing was a fury so pure and so patient that it had been waiting, perhaps for years, for exactly this moment to arrive. "Then we stand," he said. He went to the barn and retrieved the revolver he had taken from Harlan's man at the creek bed. He had 6 rounds in his own gun and another 8 in the stolen one. 14 rounds against 7 men. The math was still bad. The math had been bad since Abilene. But Caleb had fought in a war where the math was always bad, and the men who survived were not the ones with the most bullets. They were the ones with the most to lose. The riders stopped at the gate. Harlan Briggs dismounted slowly, the way a man dismounts when he wants everyone to know that he is not in a hurry because hurry implies doubt. and Harlan Briggs had never doubted anything in his life. His men fanned out behind him, hands on their weapons, eyes on the house. But Harlan was not looking at July. He was not looking at Caleb. He was looking at the man who rode in behind his group. A man on a clean horse, wearing a clean collar, with clean hands and a face that could not meet Caleb's eyes. Ward. Caleb felt the ground shift beneath him, not literally, but in the way the ground shifts when everything you believed about your life rearranges itself in a single second, and the picture that emerges is one you were never meant to see. "Tell me it is not true," Caleb said. Ward finally looked at him, and the guilt on his face was so absolute, so complete, that it did not need words to confirm it. It was written in every line, every shadow, every twitch of a mouth that wanted to speak, but could not find a single syllable worthy of the betrayal it had committed. "The ranch was dying, Caleb." Ward's voice was thin, paper thin. "I tried to tell you. I tried for years. Briggs offered me a deal. The ranch debt, forgiven, a position in Abilene. All I had to do was sell me out. Help him find the girl." The word hit Caleb like a physical blow. Not girl, not woman, the girl. As if July were a package, a line item in one of Ward's careful, precise ledgers. "She is not a girl," Caleb said. His voice was the quiet voice again, the voice from the street in Abilene, the voice that was not peace, but the half second before a gun fires. "She's standing right there, and her name is July." Harlan stepped forward. He was smiling, the smile of a man who has won so many times that winning has become boring, and the only pleasure left is watching other people realize they have lost. "This is simple, Mercer. Give me the woman and whatever she is carrying, and I will forget this happened. I will forget the debt. I will forget the 2 of my men you humiliated at the river. I will forget everything. You go back to your rotting ranch and your empty life, and nobody gets hurt." Caleb looked at Harlan, then at Ward, then at the 6 armed men standing behind them, then at July, who was beside him on the porch, her hand inside her coat, gripping the journal like it was the last honest thing left in the world. "No," Caleb said. Harlan's smile disappeared. What replaced it was something Caleb had seen before. In the war, in the faces of men who had stopped pretending that cruelty was a means to an end, and had accepted it as the end itself. "Then this gets ugly." "It was always ugly," Caleb said. "You just had better clothes." Harlan nodded to his men. 2 of them stepped forward. Caleb raised his revolver. The moment froze, the way moments freeze in the space between a match being struck and the flame catching, when everything is possible and nothing has happened yet, and the world is balanced on the edge of a blade so thin that a single breath could tip it either way. Then July stepped off the porch. She walked past Caleb, past the gate, past the 2 men who had their hands on their guns. She walked directly to Harlan Briggs and stood in front of him, close enough that he could have grabbed her, close enough that his men could have seized her before Caleb could fire a single shot. "You want this?" She pulled the journal from her coat and held it up. "This is what you have been chasing. Not me. This, every crime, every forged deed, every family you destroyed. It is all here, and you know what I am going to do with it?" Harlan reached for the journal. July pulled it back. "I already made a copy," she said. 2 copies. One is with the postmistress in town, sealed in an envelope addressed to the federal marshal in Topeka. The other is with the pastor at the church, with instructions to open it if anything happens to me, to Caleb, or to anyone on this ranch." She was lying. Caleb knew she was lying. She had not left the ranch since they arrived. She had not spoken to the postmistress or the pastor or anyone. But the lie was perfect. It was perfect because it was the kind of lie that a man like Harlan Briggs could not afford to test. The cost of being wrong was too high. The cost of being wrong was everything. Harlan's face changed. The confidence that had been carved into it like scripture on a tombstone cracked. Not much, but enough. Enough for doubt to crawl through. And doubt was the only enemy Harlan Briggs had never learned to fight. "You are bluffing. Try me." Silence. The wind moved through the yard. The cattle shifted in the pasture. 7 armed men stood behind Harlan Briggs, and not one of them moved, because none of them had been paid enough to risk prison, and the woman standing in front of their boss had just put a price on this fight. that no amount of money could cover. Harlan looked at July, then at Caleb, then at the journal, then at the town in the distance, where the postmistress lived, and the church stood, and the truth might or might not be sitting in sealed envelopes waiting to explode. "This is not over," Harlan said. "Yes, it is," July said. "You just have not realized it yet." Harlan Briggs mounted his horse. His men followed. Ward stood alone by the gate, his clean hands hanging at his sides, his clean collar catching the sun, and the look on his face was the look of a man who has just understood that the deal he made cost him the only thing that money could never buy. "Caleb," Ward said. "Do not," Caleb said. The word was a door closing, not slamming, closing, quietly, completely, and with the kind of finality that is worse than anger, because anger eventually burns out. But a door that closes quietly stays closed forever. Go with them. That is who you chose. Go. Ward opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He stood there for a moment, a man between two worlds who had betrayed one and been abandoned by the other. And then he turned and walked toward Harlan's retreating group, and with every step he took, the distance between the brothers became permanent. July watched them go. The dust from the horses rose and settled and rose again, and when it finally cleared, the road was empty, and the ranch was quiet, and the sky was the kind of blue that only exists after something terrible has almost happened, and didn't. She turned to Caleb. He was still on the porch. The revolver was still in his hand, and his hand was shaking, not from fear, from everything, from the weight of a brother's betrayal and the nearness of violence, and the sight of this woman walking into the mouth of danger like she was daring it to swallow her. "You were bluffing," he said. "Completely. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. That was the most terrified I've ever been." He looked at her. She looked at him. And the distance between them, the distance they had been measuring so carefully for 3 days, counting it in inches and guarding it with practical words and careful silences, collapsed. Not slowly, not in stages, all at once. The way a dam breaks, not because the water is strong, but because the wall is tired of holding it back. Caleb set the revolver down. He walked off the porch. He crossed the yard, and when he reached her, he did not speak. He did not ask. He put his hands on her face, gently, the way you touch something that you have been afraid to touch. Because touching it means admitting that you need it. And needing things in a world that takes everything is the most dangerous act a human being can commit. July's hands came up and covered his. Her fingers were calloused and warm, and they gripped his hands the way she had gripped that rock at the creek bed, not with tenderness, but with the fierce, defiant hold of a woman who has found the one thing she is not willing to let the world take from her. "This is impossible," she whispered. "You know that. Everything about this is impossible. I know. We have known each other for days. I know. You are a broke rancher with a dying herd and a brother who just betrayed you. And I am a woman with a price on her head and a dead man's journal and nowhere in the world to go. I know. Then why does this feel like the first thing in my life that makes sense?" Caleb looked at her. The morning sun was behind her now, and her face was half in light and half in shadow, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, not because of how she looked, but because of what she was, a survivor, a fighter, a woman who carried a weapon in the form of truth and wielded it like a sword. "Because sense has nothing to do with it," he said, "and I stopped needing things to make sense the moment you picked up that rock." She laughed, the same short, sharp, real laugh from before. And then the laugh became something else. It became quiet. It became close. It became the sound a person makes when they stop fighting and start falling, and realize that falling is not the same as failing. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not soft. It was the kind of kiss that happens when two people have been circling each other like stars caught in gravity, and the orbit finally collapses, and the collision is not destruction, but creation. It tasted like dust and sweat and the salt of tears that neither of them would admit to shedding, and it lasted long enough for the world to rearrange itself around them, placing them not at the center, but at the beginning of something that should not have existed. something that every law of probability and every cruelty of circumstance had tried to prevent, something impossible. And in the West, impossible was never a synonym for never. That afternoon, Caleb rode into town, not to run, not to hide. He rode to the postmistress and gave her an envelope. He rode to the pastor and gave him another. He made July's bluff real, because a bluff only works once, and the next time Harlan Briggs came looking, it needed to be the truth that was waiting for him. The postmistress, Margaret Dunhill, read enough of the contents to understand what she was holding. Her eyes went wide. Then they went hard. Then she locked the envelope in her safe and looked at Caleb with the expression of a woman who has just been handed a weapon she has been waiting her entire life to hold. "Harlan Briggs foreclosed on my sister's homestead in '71, Margaret said. "I always knew it was crooked. Now I know how." The pastor, a thin man named Reverend Amos Clay, read the letter that accompanied the journal copy. He folded it carefully, placed it in the church vault, and looked at Caleb with eyes that were equal parts sorrow and steel. "If anything happens to you or that woman," Reverend Clay said, "this goes to the marshal before the sun sets. And if nothing happens, then I will pray it stays that way. But I will keep the envelope regardless." Caleb rode home. July was waiting on the porch. The soil she had turned was dark and rich along the fence line. The barn door had been re-hung. The water trough had been cleaned. In 3 days, this woman had done more for the ranch than Caleb had managed in a year, not because he was incapable, but because a man working alone is only working. A man working alongside someone he loves is building. And that was the word, wasn't it? The word he had been circling since the creek bed. The word that had no name until it suddenly did. Love, not the love he had felt for Eliza, which had been gentle and warm and safe. This love was different. This love was a wildfire. It did not ask permission, did not wait for conditions to be right. It burned through every wall and every fence and every carefully constructed defense, and left behind not destruction, but clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you have been living in smoke for so long and that you forgot what the world looked like without it. "It is done," he said, dismounting. "The copies are safe." July nodded. "And Ward?" Ward made his choice. She looked at him. She could see the wound beneath the words, a wound that would take years to heal, if it ever healed at all. She did not try to comfort him. She did not offer empty words or false hope. She simply walked to where he stood, took his hand, and held it. That was all. That was enough. They stood in the yard of a broken ranch at the edge of a dying town in a country that had never promised them anything except the right to try. And trying, in the West, was the only prayer that ever got answered. 2 weeks later, they were married, not in a grand ceremony, not in a church filled with flowers and music, in the same chapel where the story began, the one from the flash forward, with the blood on Caleb's knuckles and the wildflowers shaking in July's hands. But here is what the beginning of this story did not tell you. The blood on Caleb's knuckles was not from Harlan's men. It was from fixing the chapel door, which had been stuck for years, and Caleb had torn his knuckles pulling it open so July could walk through. The torn shirt was from catching it on a nail in the doorway, and July was trembling not because she was afraid of who might come through the door, but because she was standing next to a man she had known for less than a month, and she was about to promise him forever, and forever was a word she had never been brave enough to use before. The preacher asked if he took this woman. Caleb looked at July, at the bruise that was almost gone, at the hands that were no longer clenched, at the eyes that were no longer searching for the nearest road out of town. She was looking at him now, only at him, and in her eyes, the impossible thing that had started in a dusty street in Abilene had become the most real thing in the world. "I do," he said, and she said it back. 2 words, the smallest sentence in the English language, the heaviest thing either of them had ever carried, and the easiest. Outside the chapel, the Kansas sun was doing what it always did, burning without apology, turning the prairie gold, making the whole world look like something that had been set on fire and survived. Caleb and July Mercer walked out into that sun, hand in hand, and the town of Copper Hill watched them go. And for once, Margaret Dunhill had nothing to say. Because some stories are so complete that even the fastest tongue in Kansas knows to let them speak for themselves. He had gone to buy cattle. He came home with a bride no one expected. But here is the truth that the title does not tell you. The truth that only the story can carry. He did not bring her home. She brought him home. To a life he had stopped living. To a heart he had stopped using. To a future he had stopped believing in. She walked into his broken world with calloused hands and a dead man's journal and a voice like forged steel. And she did not save him. She did something harder. She reminded him that he was worth saving. And in the West, where the land is unforgiving and the sky is too wide and the distance between people can feel like the distance between stars, that is not just a love story. That is a miracle. If this story touched something inside you, share it with someone who believes that impossible love always finds a way. And if you want to know what happens when Harlan Briggs makes his next move, comment part 2 below, because this story is far from over.